Well, that was curious.
Hmm.
All right, let me send these 2 notifications real quick. All right, I think that worked.
Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Hey, afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Happy New Year, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be in 2024, I think. There's so much stuff out there in the world now. It's like, what's next is really the next thing. So it's like, what kind of waves of disenfranchisement are we going to see in the podcasting space? And there's been a lot of talk about, how some people are upset that other people are saying, given a bad name to podcasting now, because financially things have been tough. So it's kind of an interesting landscape right now of a lot of discussion about where the podcast medium is now and what the future looks like and what we've been through, and everybody's got a little slightly different take on it. And I don't know if we want to talk about some of that stuff today, but it might be an interesting thing for us to dive into a little bit.
We can, but I just want to let everybody know we are lit and live on those new podcast apps at podcastapp.com. We're on I changed everything. We're on a new streaming, I guess not necessarily platform, but interface. I tested yesterday, and we should be coming through audio-wise. So if any of you are listening on any of the podcasting apps, please, ping back and let me know that the Live and Lit is working as it was supposed to. And basically, the audio stream is where the changes were made. So, but yeah, everything's settled kind of in with the new hardware, so nothing new on that. But to be honest with you, Rob, I was reflecting and getting into your point. I here we are, and I'm going to say we're officially heading into, August in my calendar, and I think in most podcasters' calendar, besides what James says. And by the way,
don't eat me, James Cridland.
I consider 2024 the true 20th year in podcasting, and and really this is 20 years ago. This is when things really kicked off,
to really kick off. I agree.
Yeah. So as we march to both you and I, I guess I'm speaking proper English today, 20th anniversaries, you in late September, me in early October. I kind of made it a point that I kind of made a decision, and I put a Facebook post up. I announced in Blueberry Group, I announced in the Podcast Movement Group that I'm going to do just like I do on this show, and it's going to be a no bullshit year. Not that we don't do that already, but I just, I get into so many of these groups and I hear stuff and I just cringe and I cringe and I cringe on the advice the content creators get. I'm at a point where I'm just going to start saying, hey, if you want real advice and no filter, I'm going to tell you how it is and what you're going to have to do. And I'm going to set up a private group, and those that want to be in that private group, we'll meet every couple of weeks and have an open discussion. And I'm just going to, this year, I'm just, so often now, there's lots of pundits, like you said, oh, podcasting's dying. And I think there needs to be, I think I've earned my placement in the point to be able to give my opinion and know something. What I say is, I talk to podcasters weekly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, and you do too. And it's a situation now where I don't think a lot of people really understand the ground truth on what's happening with, podcasters. And I think I'm going to adopt something that Adam Curry said. I'm going to stop. There are no indie podcasters. There are podcasters. And whatever level you're at, all struggle the same exact way. And
well, especially now, it's not like really even these bigger companies have as much of an advantage as people think they do, or at least they used to, because they had big budgets. Now they're back doing it like everybody else has been doing for a long time, right? They have to be responsible.
And a few people were congratulating me, and it's not about the congratulations. Let's just leave that. Let's leave that behind. Let's set this space up. Let's set podcasting up to move forward for the next 10 years. Let's
it's got to be built on a foundation that's solid and people understand and is clear. I think, I agree with you, Todd. I think that there is this kind of undertow it's happened before.
Yeah.
And you and I have seen this happen before.
I don't think it's as significant. I think we're seeing more naysayers than we ever have. People like to pile on to a good party, when podcasting's dying. It's not.
Well, I think we've fallen, in perception, we've fallen quite a bit. Whether or not that's really based on real data and real reality, I just think that we got to be, so hyped up about what this medium was doing and what it was accomplishing that it was a little beyond kind of where it really was all along. And people were doing things that were probably not smart to begin with this medium, given this enhanced feeling about the medium that somehow it was, in the gold age or something like that we had to, do things so much differently than we've always done them. And that's also coming out right now too. It's like, since the industry's down a little bit in its perception, it's like, well, now we got to redo everything, right?
Right.
RSS needs to go away and we need to go more proprietary because that's the only way we're going to come back. I mean, I'm hearing that kind of rhetoric too. And it's like, well, why throw the baby out with the bathwater? RSS is what built this medium. Why do you want to throw it out as a solution to a downturn? It just doesn't make any sense.
And the thing is, there are solutions to address many of the concerns,
the things that they say about RSS, right?
So, but yet they've ignored.
Nobody wants to do it, right?
Yeah, they've ignored those, these new adoptions and some of the stuff we're doing in podcasting 2.0. But I think that we need to remember, and I think podcasters are starting to wake up to this, that, and I'm going to be very, very frank here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go along a party lines. You can't trust YouTube at this point. You can't trust them to do the right thing, because Google has a history of not doing the right thing. For number one, if you want to have a YouTube channel,
Todd, also, just another layer on top of that, can we ever, or should we ever, trust any huge corporation that has a lot of power and control? I think is the bigger thing. Right?
And we had a show today that is making the move over to a platform that shall not be named, that has been promised a bunch of money. And we basically said, okay, we recommend that you don't shut your account down here. We're going to leave the lights on for you.
Mhm.
And as soon as the grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence, you can come back. But there's this demand. Oh, you have to move to our platform. You can't be hosted anywhere else. You have to be hosted over here. And that's fine and dandy. They can make the move. But time and time and time again, we've seen people leave. And then a couple months later, they come back because the grass wasn't greener on the other side of the fence. So if we look at what Spotify has done, again, you're being monetized. Your content's being monetized around you. Your audience members are paying to be over there. And again, it's a closed ecosystem. It's a monopoly. So we don't care. And I go on the mantra. Go ahead and distribute to all those places. It's all good. I'm not naysaying not being on YouTube. I'm not naysaying don't be on Spotify. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is don't forget that these folks are not your friend. They don't care about you. And you should care about yourself and care about your brand. And it doesn't matter where your host is, as long as you control your RSS feed, you're good. Now, of course, I'm biased. I want them over on Blueberry, but not all of them are going to move. That's fine. And those shows that are chasing money are going to chase money. And again, I have serious concerns on that space too. Because I don't think 2024 is going to be any better money-wise on the advertising side. They can say all they want. Oh, spending's going to be up and everything's going to be good. But it's just like the news. There's no recession. We're not in a slowdown. Yet we had 8% inflation the year before, 4% compounded again this year, whatever it's going to be, so you're compounding inflation, people are tight, budgets are tight. I just come off the holidays talking to a lot of people, and I talked about on the last show. Maybe it's good in your neighborhood, but so I think 2024 is going to be another rough year. I hope not. I hope it pulls out and we make a major recovery and everything turns to to gold. But wish in one hand and poop in the other and see what you get first. So, and that's not even.
That's an interesting analogy. I haven't heard that one before.
Well, my dad would use another term, and it wasn't it wasn't
Right.
poop. You wish in one hand and I think that we need to set realistic expectations.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. When I was in the Navy, there was this term that we like to use. It was called sustained superior performance. If you maintained sustained superior performance, you would get promoted. If you were average, you wouldn't get promoted very quickly. And if you are below average, you would fall behind.
Right.
So you have to have sustained superior content. And that sustained superior content has to bring value to your listeners to make them want to tune in and listen again.
Yeah.
If your content is average, they're going to go find something else to listen to. And it doesn't matter all the tricks and you can go to Podfest, you can go to Podcast Movement, all the stuff that they talk to us about on how to build shows. Well, you can wish in one hand and poop in the other that you're going to wish that you have a great show. Well, that wish needs to be sustained superior content. So
Yeah, I think these things aren't new.
No.
These things have been the criteria for podcasting since podcasting started.
But-
so it's
but I don't think, and I took some time,
Mhm.
and this is time I'll never get back. I specifically only watched, and boy, my amygdala needs shrinking. I purposely watched stuff on the platform that shall not be named that called themselves a podcast. And I'm going to be honest with you, what a train wreck some of this stuff is.
Are
Absolute
you talking about the content or the platform?
content is absolute
Okay.
train wreck. 6,
Right.
7 people all talking on top of each other. And it was nothing more than, and I understand what, in my opinion, on why some of those shows were popular is because they were like CNN or MSNBC or Fox. They were providing chaos entertainment.
And extreme speculation.
Decisiveness between, and it was
Right.
dating, it was relationships, it was
Yep.
sports. I mean, and to be honest with you, it must attract a certain demographic of listeners because to me, I got nothing out of it. There was no, 142-minute program that I listened to, tried to, and I had no takeaways from that 42 minutes except people bashing each other.
Yeah, unfortunately, our media landscape has digressed into, emotional kind of topics that drive division, right? In perspective. Now, granted, I think we're all in favor of free speech, and we all would love everybody to say anything and everything that they want to. And I think that still exists to some degree in podcasting, and I think that is a good thing. That this medium is kind of open to all sorts of views and topics, and I think it's its strength.
So while that format may work over there on that platform, I think people that listen,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I'm wrong, I think they want to be educated and listen to constructive conversation. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think also that, this was probably a couple decades ago that mainstream media, if that's what we're talking about here, had kind of shifted their news departments to be part of the entertainment department. Right. So you had this shift in priorities, really, around building audience, not delivering journalism. Right. And I think once we headed down that path, we kind of had this blended experience of driving people to extreme emotions was the goal, because that's what they learned in the data, that's what kept people watching. And not so much like the old days when journalism wasn't, those programs weren't sponsored, right? There were no advertisers, that they weren't part of the entertainment side, and they certainly didn't have a connection to the ad sales side. But now all those things are munged together into one thing. And so that's where we've started to see the decline of the mainstream media, because they lost all of our trust. And that's where podcasting and online video and stuff has really picked up and is really moving the ball forward now, is because all of these independent voices have felt the need and the desire to share other views that weren't aligned with the corporate agenda.
So, going back to 2024,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we just have to, again,
Mm-hmm.
go back and say, it's about content.
Yeah.
And we have to have a double down on the understanding that the content is king. And yes, you can help yourself with a whole bunch of other stuff, which you have to do.
Yeah, you have to think about distribution too. and how your content aligns with the distribution side. Are you reaching the right kind of viewer or listener in the right demo group to the kind of content you're creating too? And
again,
you know,
with only 0.5% of
Yeah.
podcasters doing true video podcasts that are available via RSS.
Yeah.
Again,
Right.
I'm not going to get wrapped around the ankle here by talking about video that much, because again, very, 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 very few shows are being successful doing video. And yeah, okay, you might be getting a discovery or two, which I doubt.
Well, I think that's the distinction, Todd, that your point is well taken, is that, what is the success of the video side of what you're doing? And is that important to you too? Is success, what does success look like too? These are complicated questions
Now,
to answer.
success to every podcaster I talk to about growth, about growing an audience.
Okay.
It's rarely that anyone has, rarely does, at least when I go into the initial conversation,
Right.
What are we talking about? I want to grow my show. And then I flip it around on them. And then we've talked about this in a previous show. I say, okay, what's the goal? What is the true goal of the show? And if you can get them to get the content creator to think about the goal, then sometimes the growth isn't as important, because then you get them to focus on the goal.
Yeah.
And then look at the small wins. Look at when you reach 100, when you reach 500, look when you reach 1,000 listeners. And then, visualize what that looks like. And, if you're going to go up and speak in front of 500 people, are you prepping like you are going to go and talk in front of 500 people? It's just like the podcast presentation. I'm preparing to stand in front of 500 people. There won't be that many people at my session. There might be 50 or 100 if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But still, I'm prepping as if I'm going to be talking to 500 people to be able to influence 500 people. I'll spend more time on that presentation than I'll ever spend on a single episode of Geek News Central or this show, because I'll have spent, probably 20 hours getting ready for that presentation. So, this is the thing we have to think about. If I'm going to spend 20 hours getting ready to present in front of 500 people, and yet when you and I sit down here and do this show, we're reaching over 10,000 content creators. We don't do any prep, but should we? And then again, is the advice I'm giving, am I drinking my own Kool-Aid? But again, my goal is not necessarily to grow my podcast, at least on the tech show. So I don't know. I just, I got to thinking about it, and really there's 3 or 4 things that triggered it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variables that each content creator needs to assess, right? That there's a lot of different ways of doing this, and I think that's the strength of online media, is that it is kind of a blank canvas of opportunity, right? You can create and do what you want. If you are passionate about video, do video. If you're passionate about audio, do audio. And if you're passionate about both, do both. I don't think anybody's stopping anybody from doing anything here. It's just, your own values, your own strategy, your own approach. It's kind of like starting a new company, right? Come up with your unique strategy, your unique approach, and implement it and get it done. Be, like you say, Todd, do it consistently and keep trying new things all the time, and see what works. And if it doesn't work in some period of time, then, hang up the microphone. But, that shouldn't be how you go into it, is thinking that will be what you will do 20 episodes in potentially, or something like that.
And
so you need to, right.
And at the same time, I'm just so sick and tired of consultant doublespeak. And people are so willing just to, okay. It's like, follow me into the raging river. We will be able to get across.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's only 6 inches deep, but it's running 100 miles per hour. Don't worry, we can get across. Come on.
That's right. You put 1 foot in it and you're gone.
And
right.
you know, and then 3 days later they're fishing your body out. 3 miles downstream, you're wrapped around a log and you drowned in 3 inches of water. So I'm just sick of this. No, it's true.
That's how it's being portrayed out there. Is what that it's such a treacherous landscape of things to do and not do, and I think a lot of people just don't get started because they're just flustered with the whole process and how complicated it can be.
And I hate to say it, going to that point, it's not that difficult.
Right. Well, and it's a valid question to ask is, should I do it too? I know that there's been some folks in the industry that have pointed out, and it's sometimes controversial, is the question is, should you do an online show, right? I mean, do you
but we're not even
really
talking
want to do it, or are you following it because somebody said
we're not even talking about live. We're just talking about someone that's in their closet.
Any online media.
Recording their content. I think that we have an opportunity here to just give people this understanding that it's going to take work. That's the ultimate thing. And again, I go back to, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm watching stuff on, and I often will go back into people's back inventory, and I'll go way back, especially on the platform that will not be named. I will go back as far as I can into 10 years ago when they were a nobody creating content, and they had 10 views, and then 20, then 100, then 450, and that's like 5 years to get to 450.
Actually, I think that's a terrific example, Todd, because a lot of people see these very popular YouTubers or podcasters or whatever, and they think that this happened overnight, and oftentimes it didn't. Right? If you go back and look in their archives, which that's what's great about podcasting, is you can do that.
You can do it on
where they started.
You can do it on the platform that shall not be named either.
Do it on this one.
Well, but you can't go.
To some degree.
But you can't go look at their stats.
Right, which is, but you can tell by the production, like, how they did it, all that kind of stuff like that. You can go back and look at the early radio show that I did back in 1999. It's still available as an MP3 file off my website. Like February 7th of 1999 was the first radio show that I did, live radio show that is recorded and still available out there. And you can see where I started on this path. And that's the same thing you can do with a lot of these big content creators, and just kind of skip forward, like a year after that and a year after that, if they've done it that long, and see how they've changed, see how they've improved, and or not. Maybe they've gone the other way.
Leland says in the on the Facebook chat, he says, I tried to do that in the Shiawassee to save a rowboat. Wasn't a good call on my part. Thank God for low-hanging branches.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that you and I have lived and breathed this medium 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since the beginning.
20 years. Right.
Okay. And it's remarkable. It's remarkable how many times I answer the same question again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where sometimes my responses to people, they take take it back a little bit because they're
Well,
like,
it's not what they expected.
well, that was rough.
Yeah.
And so here's the bottom line. I'm going to have a private group. You want to be part of the group, send me a message. You can follow or take or leave the advice I'm going to give you, whether take it or leave it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to talk about the trials, tribulations of everything that's happened to me personally over the past 19 plus years. And we'll have frank, hard discussions about your content, your content, your content. And
Okay, yeah.
so it's going to be a no bullshit perspective.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
take all these other naysayers. I see the numbers. Matter of fact, Blueberry's going to start putting out our own report. It's going to be unique. We're working on getting the first version of it out. We ran the data yesterday, and we'll talk about what happened in December in a few days.
So do you say report, is it around metrics? And
it's going to have a whole bunch of stuff in it.
Okay.
And we tried to come up with something. Some of the stuff would be some that repeat other people do, but some of it's, we're trying to get some unique perspectives from the data sets we have. And I think that's going to go along with setting some of the narrative of some of these discussions as just, the hard reality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to make anyone quit. This is
No, if not the obvious. I mean, the opposite.
right.
Of that.
This is
help
today.
people get off on the right foot.
This is today.
Right.
And I've been saying this for 6 months or 9 months or whatever it's been. It's the best time ever to be a podcaster. It is absolutely, unequivocally the best time.
Yeah, because hopefully in the future there will be an upside here.
Right.
We've seen a significant drop off in the amount of active shows and people publishing new episodes. So whenever you see that, there's always a down, but that also means that eventually it's just like the stock market. If you stick around long enough, it'll pop up higher, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, this happened back in 2008 and 9, where we saw a big fall off of content creators, and that's where a lot of the most popular podcasts, they all started back in that time frame.
Yeah. Leland
says, they kept growing. Right.
Another comment, Leland said, wishing you both a happy new year. Be sure to get in on the latest declaration. I don't know what that is.
Declaration?
Yeah. Leland, you're going to have to clue us in. I don't know what that is. Eileen, happy new year to you as well. Thank you for chiming in on YouTube.
So did you see the news on Generation Z, which is the younger side of the podcast community? I think it's the 18 to 24 age group. The Gen Z biggest podcasters are all working from bed. Did you see the headline of that?
Why would they say that? Why is that? Why is it so demeaning?
Well, it says it cuts down on room echo or something like that. I don't believe that, but it's just an interesting
working from bed.
take.
That is like the ultimate demeaning.
Yeah.
Who wrote that?
I agree with you. Let's see where that came from. Let's see here.
Working from
Fast Company of all places. It says why Gen Z's biggest podcasters are working from bed.
I have a bunch of kids in the 18 to 24-year-old range. And you know what they're doing? They're working their butts off because they're trying to survive in this cruel world right now that is where costs have went up. They're not working from bed.
So the first sentence of this article in Fast Company is this a woman, I'm not going to mention her name, she's an iconic 90s supermodel, I guess. I'm not sure how that's a Gen Z, but maybe. Yeah, I guess it could be. Says wouldn't get out of bed for anything less than $10,000 a day.
What?
That's the first paragraph of this article. Says now a new generation of young media personalities are finding they don't have to leave bed at all to make bank. In fact, for some, the bed has become the broadcast set of choice and the strategy to connect with audiences in a whole new way, Todd.
All right, I'm trying to go back in my comments here. I must have missed it. He posted, you want to read this on your show right now, was sent out at 4 a.m. on January 1st. Okay, I don't know if I can go back and read the old comments. I guess I got to refresh the page. How do I see this? Oh.
What was it called again?
Oh. Oh, I don't know if we can talk about this on the show.
Oh, okay. I mean, just to kind of put a little cherry on top of this Gen Z article, for many years, and there are a lot of successful podcasts, and this is a true fact. And I'm not saying that what's being said here isn't true. I'm just saying that a lot of podcasts have been recorded in closed closets.
Yeah, yeah. I've done
because of the sound buffering effect.
Oh, I have recorded in some weird. I've used pillows off a bed, not in the bed.
Yeah. Or shipping blankets hanging on the walls, or all sorts of stuff. I've done all that stuff too. Yeah.
Won't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day. Well, you know what? I hope they're taking that money that they're making when they do get out of bed and investing it well.
Right. Where are those? The question. Where would you invest your money now?
Yeah. Leland, I don't know if that's a topic for the show or not. I will review it after the show. Thanks for putting it on linking it in the podcast. Eileen says, do you all remember what we used to call sleep blabs? Oh, blab. Was it blabs that where people were falling asleep on?
Is that another way of saying it was boring content? Is that what they're saying? Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I do say, and Todd, we've had this discussion a lot over the last month or more about video and things. And I do hear this across the industry, rhythm around video. I mean, everybody's kind of like, that's the hot thing now.
Right. Well, knock themselves out.
And I think that's being driven by what the unnamed platform is, the YT platform, has driven that change in people's kind of perspectives.
If you listen to this show,
right,
you have been warned.
You've been well, yeah. You've been warned that, just tread carefully and make sure that it's not a waste of your time, right? That's the takeaway.
Because believe me, when I go on the road and travel and we just do audio, the production time for this show is remarkably short. I'm done like 20 minutes after we finish the show. I'm done. It's put up, the transcripts run, it's easy. Right. It's very easy to get, but anytime you're doing video, then that's an hour at least. And I'm a minimalist editor as it is. Don't do no color correction, nothing. We just rock and roll with it. And it's going to be more time.
Yeah.
It's going to be more time. So
they do have a photograph of a bunch of podcasters doing their podcasts in bed on this article.
Oh, please, we don't want to see that. That's probably AI generated anyway. So
it looks pretty real, actually.
So so All right.
It's the new set for the new generation.
Here is some hard hitting, no BS advice.
Hard hitting. Wow.
If you're laying in bed doing your podcast, your diaphragm, number one, is compressed. Number two, are you really going to be in the mood to give a high energy show? To be honest with you, the best podcasters don't do their show sitting down. They do it standing up. Now, Rogan sits down and others, but a lot of people do their show standing up.
Well, that's certainly been a technique in broadcast radio for a long time.
Yeah, because it's just allows you to have more energy for the show.
Plus, they also usually keep the temperature like down to like 65 degrees. So you're like,
so you got to keep
wide awake. You're not, getting sleepy because it's too warm.
Right. So, I don't advise that, doing your podcast from a bed. But, if you're just talking about,
it's this concept, Todd, and I've explored this a little bit with my work with the Nomano platform around the kind of more casual recording environment. So you can get in with some of the newer technology that's coming out, where it creates more podcasts that I would consider to be more conversational, not interviews per se. And I think that's kind of what's going on there to some degree, is that it's kind of casual conversations between a group of people, like it showed in some of the pictures, it showed like 4 people all in bed together. It just so happens that they were under the covers. It could have been at a regular studio, but it just so happened to be in somebody's bed. So I don't know.
What was the topic of the show?
Well, this particular show I saw the picture of. It was all women, all sitting around, young women, all sitting around talking. So maybe they were talking about, their relationships and their relationships or their boyfriends or what they were talking about.
This was some of the stuff I was watching on YouTube over the weekend. And
it's probably very similar to that. Maybe that's the next thing coming to YouTube is video podcasts from podcasters in bed. So we'll have to see if that's the next big trend here, Todd.
But, some of the stuff that was being said on some of these shows, both women and men,
well,
there's no way I would even get into those topics, because it's like, do they want jobs in the future? Because some of the stuff that was being said, I'm like, if I'm a future employer and I see that.
Yeah, but Todd, I think you have to think about the changing culture of the next generation too.
Yeah,
it's
true,
coming
too.
up. It's not.
They can going to
be the same as our.
They can get away with it. I sure can.
Right, and
and
I think increasingly, the younger generation has been able to get away with this stuff up until recently. Increasingly because of the labor market, and I think that has changed. So I don't know if that means that employers are going to be more stringent on what they are looking for in hiring going forward, but that may change things. You're exactly right, Todd, that could be a fallout from this, is that relaxed kind of approach to your external persona and your external perception. People being a little too casual in what they're doing and maybe not looking professional may hurt people in the future. But maybe not.
And not to mention, across the board, there was a whole and I don't. Again, I'm just an old white guy,
right?
But
don't listen to me, right?
Yeah. But some of the stuff to me was like, where did you go to school?
Well, that's opening a Pandora's box, right? Given what we've been seeing happen with the president of Harvard here the last couple of days, right?
Oh, I'm not even talking about any of that. But I know.
But that's an indication of what's going on here.
I'm old, so just it is what it is.
Well, I'm trying to see the world through
I'm too
people's eyes,
and
I know you are too.
I'm trying.
And but also, see it from a very practical perspective too. And knowing that, I guess it depends on the audience that you're trying to reach with your show.
For sure.
And that's what the bigger,
and some of those shows were definitely, 18 to 26
if you're
or 27
speaking
crowd.
to an audience that appreciates you doing your podcast from your bed,
Right.
Then, or thinks that's cool or thinks that's fun or whatever the rationale is, they could grow an audience doing that because it's something different, right? It's something unique. And we're always looking for content creators to do something new or something.
Well, some of these guys
innovative, maybe.
Some of these guys better pray their shows do very, very well and bring in a lot of revenue, because otherwise,
well,
they're
that's
going
what this article said, is that the most popular Gen Z podcasters, or some of the most popular, are doing it from their beds. So,
and well, again, most stuff I was watching was not coming from a bed, but some of the panel discussions were such that I was just like, you better pray you have a great show, otherwise it's going to be a long, lonely road in the workplace.
Right.
You better be a really good entertainer for a very long time.
A lot of younger people, I believe, are struggling to find careers, and they're increasingly looking to being influencers or online content creators as a career path. And certainly podcasting is part of the mix now. So I guess we have to be careful about discouraging.
Oh, I don't want to discourage nobody.
Because we want them to be the next generation of content creators.
Well, and again, I'm never one to say don't do content that it's this
exactly.
This thing about this medium is, then the beauty about this medium remains. You do whatever you want.
Right.
Knock yourselves out.
And they will. Whether we like it or not.
Have a good time. I'm not one to judge. Maybe I have been judging, but guess what? Go ahead.
Well, I think you're looking at it from the perspective of success and performance of what you're doing, what's going to work, right? Yeah. And I guess part of what I'm saying is I'm not always 100% sure that I know.
I don't either.
What that,
because I can't talk.
That's right.
I can't talk to that audience. That's a different generation.
Right.
But I do know that. Again, based upon the breadth of content being created out there, that you should strive to put the work in to have great content that gives great value back.
Right.
I felt no need to give any donations to any of those shows, but some of those shows had that super chat thing going on, and they were getting $50 and $100, and I was like, people are giving money for this. I guess they're getting value. So
where's our super chat, Todd?
It's right here, and you send your boost.
It's called Satoshis.
Yeah, right? Send your boost using one of those new podcast apps.
Yep.
Beauty Bubble says, the Sleeping Blabs brought a lot of people together, sorta. Todd, it's practically a prerequisite to demonstrate you know how to sleep on the job.
It's an awesome point, Beauty Bubble. I appreciate that. All right.
Yeah, that's on YouTube. So, I think, as we head into 2024 here, as we are into 2024, I think that there's just more of the same. I'll be speaking about podcasting 2.0 at PodFest. That's my topic. We're going to be doing a live event at PodFest. We're going to be doing a new media show there. You've got a podcast host provider that's from India. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's going to be joining us. So we're going to hear about the international scene a little bit.
Yep. And I'll get one other person up there too that can give us a kind of a unique perspective on the industry. So,
and then the Hall of Fame announcement will come next Monday, you think?
On Monday, right? Correct. At least that's the current plan, anyway.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
So
all will be disclosed at that point.
I will be at CES. So I'll leave Friday for Vegas. Matter of fact,
So I'm assuming that we're not doing a show next Wednesday.
No, impossible. You can do one on your own if you want. You
Yeah.
get somebody.
Yeah. I'll probably wind up doing a show, maybe covering the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that bring the other Rob on.
I haven't pulled that together yet, but that might be a good idea, Todd. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a good idea. I can ask Rob if he can join.
Yeah, so I think that will be a interesting conversation.
Yes, it will be an interesting conversation. It's been interesting to try and pull that event together. Again, it used to be with Podcast Movement. It's where it was started, and then this past year, it moved to Podfest. So we've had to create a whole nother kind of organization around trying to put on the event. So I think we leaned a lot on Podcast Movement to do a lot of that. But this year it's kind of on our plates to pull all the details together.
Well, sounds like a good time is being had by all.
Yeah. And we may still call on you, Todd, to help out if we can.
All right.
If we
Yeah,
need to.
absolutely.
So, yeah. And so anyway, so that's going on. And like I said, we're doing a new media show. Actually, that's on the new media show is like 3:30 in the afternoon on the 25th of January. And the Hall of Fame starts at 7 p.m. on the 26th, which is Friday.
I think my session is on. I have to go back and look at the calendar, but I think I'm Friday as well for my session.
Oh yeah,
late afternoon.
yeah. So
I don't know who I'm going head to head with yet. I got to go look at that. But
it's going to be interesting to see what the turnout is.
Well,
at the event this year.
Considering the parties involved that I know, it should be fun.
Yeah. Oh, it's always a fun event to
Yeah.
go to. I've always enjoyed it. If you want to go check it out, if you haven't ever been to Podfest, just go to podfestexpo.com and you can get all the deets on that.
That and it sounds to me like they've done a pretty good job. Last year we didn't exhibit because, well, we just didn't exhibit last go around, and
chose not to.
Yeah,
right.
and they did a good job in bringing the numbers back, and so we'll be there. Mackenzie and I will be there. It's podfestexpo.com.
Podfest Expo, right?
Yeah.
And then the Hall of Fame. If you want to check on that website, you can go to it now. It's at podcasthof.com. It's a podcast Hall of Fame, and hopefully that site will be updated on Monday. So
Let's see if
all the new deets.
Let's see if I can find my session. When's it going to be? 2.0. I have to search for my name. Yeah, so we're 3:30 to 5. It's going to be our dealio. I don't know where the heck mine is. Because it's in sub-sessions is what you got to, let me click on my name and then, what else?
I also saw that the average cost per thousand for podcast ads for 2023 via AdvertiseCast was $22.58, and I guess it represented a 6% drop year over year in CPMs. It said the December average was 22.9 from November to December, so that was up a little bit.
I guess
the average was
23.
22.58.
22.58. I guess my presentation is Saturday, right after lunch, 1:15.
Oh, Saturday. Okay.
So I don't know what is the that's I guess that's a good prime day.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah, just digging through the schedule here, but gives me an extra day to tweak the presentation.
So I saw that that James linked to an article titled "A Year On from the Death of Podcasting."
Oh my goodness.
So it shows a tombstone with 2004 dash question mark. It says 2022, the year that podcasting died.
22 was the year. So someone backdated it to 22, huh?
Yeah, I guess. Well, yeah, I guess it's kind of a referential article that was talking about the prediction in podcasting. So
We're still here.
we are still here, right? But I think he was a year late in his prediction.
We've seen, what is this, a fifth cycle of podcasting is dead?
Oh, at least, probably more.
I think it happens about, every 3 years or so? Someone says that
Yeah.
2 to 3 years. Yep.
Yeah. If they see something happen in the industry that they don't like, they say, oh, it must be dead. So, yeah.
I will say that it's pretty flat, but it's not dead.
Right now it is. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. There's no question. But we've been through flat periods
Sure.
before. I don't know that it depends on how you value this market, right? Is it all just based on the number of shows and the number of advertisers, and that's all that really matters, or do the listeners matter?
The podcast industrial complex, it's all about the money. So if there is a downturn in advertising, oh my God, that they're crying buckets, because.
Yeah, I had a person on Twitter send a tweet to me with a mention of that phrase, right? The podcast industrial complex. And I wrote him back and I asked him, why don't you think about that a little bit before you post that, to give me a little context on what you think the podcast industrial complex actually is. And I don't know what you think it is, Todd. Is it, I guess if you take the analogy of like the military industrial complex
it's the money machine.
Right. It's usually a referential to big companies, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the companies that are, driving the $2, $3, $4, $5 billion in, advertising revenue. That's the thing we lose focus on, is that. So,
yeah, but does that include all the hosting companies too? Does that include all of the advertising sales agencies? Does that include?
I think so.
The listening platforms is the podcast industrial complex.
I don't think the listening platforms, because they don't derive revenue from advertising from podcast ads. Matter of fact, oftentimes they get blamed for the ads. Marco's always happened to say, hey, that ad came from the podcaster, not from my app. And I don't know, I guess we're part of it. If you consider, we're doing programmatic. So I guess we're part of the money machine. But at the same time, I'd like to think that things that we do are, ad revenue is not by any means our primary focus. I mean, it's like a 3% focus, 3-4%, maybe 5% focus. 95% of the rest of the focus of at least Blueberry, and I can't say that for Libsyn, but for Blueberry, it's definitely tools and services, whereas probably Libsyn is more like 50%. Because of their relationship with, having owned advertised cast. I don't know about Buzzsprout or RSS.com. They're probably like us on the advertising front. They run a little bit of programmatic, but again, more focused on services. Whereas Megaphone and some of those others are definitely, they are definitely tied to the hip to ad revenue. So I think it, depends on how you're looking at it from the hosting provider side.
Yeah, I posed the question to Chat GPT-4. What is the podcast industrial complex? And it came back with some results. But it said the term podcast industrial complex isn't formally defined, but it generally refers to the rapid growing industry around podcasts. This industry includes not just the creation and distribution of podcast content, but also the surrounding ecosystem of technology platforms, advertising networks, and production services and marketing efforts. But actually, it really is really kind of referring to the whole ecosystem.
Well, you know who's originated the podcast industrial complex, right?
Who?
Dave and Adam.
Oh, Dave and Adam, right? Right. So that's probably where it came from.
But if I do look at the current statistics, it's been a pretty rough week. Numbers are 87,225 episodes in the last 3 days. That's way off. That's the lowest 3-day average I think I've ever seen. 179. Of course, I just came off New Year's. It's in this year, New Year's was on everything fell on a Monday, so most people were off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Right.
Okay, so they got 4 days. So
some people took off a couple days after.
Yeah,
too.
so maybe took off Friday PTO, and then took Tuesday. They got they got 2 for 5. My company, we only work 36 hours a week now as it is. And so everyone at my company had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. So a lot of my team members opted to take Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and half a day Friday. So, we really set them up to maximize their PTO time. And a lot of my team members don't come back until the 8th. So I'm sure a lot of people were off on vacation. And I know a lot of podcasters that are on the high end. They took a whole month off. They took, like from the 15th of December to January 15th, which is big. But yeah, this show's published in the last 3 days, 87, in other words, shows, that's not episodes, but 87,000. So think about this for a second. And where the opportunity lied for those that did an episode Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. You had lots of people, and this is what I was doing. I ran out of content. All my YouTube channels that I watch weren't producing anything. That's what made me go digging to watch a whole bunch of content, just kind of a research project. And did I lose you? Oh.
No, I just shared. This is James Cridland's chart of active podcast trends off of the podcastbusinessjournal.com website.
Okay, but so again, so the thing with this chart, Rob, is the problem with it is that at a peak was at 360,000 down to 315. Yeah, so you've had over the past.
Yeah, it's in the last 30 days.
So that's because you look at it. Where did it fall? November 27th, stuff started dropping off. It'll come back. It always does.
Yeah, I mean that's not an unusual.
No,
pattern.
It's not unusual.
Right.
That's only 30 days. Yeah, it's not unusual. Absolutely not unusual.
Yeah, so we usually see a fall off in the month of December.
Well, for a period of time, there was not any. For 3, 4, 5 years, we didn't see a drop during the holidays.
Right.
Because everyone was seeking content. And so I've been watching my stats, and I've only been doing one show a week because of the way the holiday schedule worked. And last Thursday, man, the show that I put out last Thursday, it had great numbers right off within 24 hours. I'm sure this one will too, because a lot of people are, it's just the way the holidays fell this year was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not worried about it. That number's coming back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it starts to climb again as we move into late January, and see if and also, Todd, if you start seeing a growth in people coming in and creating new podcasts, because I mean, at an increasing rate because of New Year's resolutions or whatever, that this year I'm going to start my podcast. I mean, I know a couple people that I've been kind of giving advice to for a while that are doing that.
Well,
So
good time
yeah.
to start. The audience
it is. There's not as much competition.
Yeah,
out
the
there.
audience hasn't went anywhere. They're still here.
Right. Yeah. And really, if anything, it's going to be interesting to see what the numbers look like around audience from the Edison Research folks and Sounds Profitable or whatever, about how audience growth is.
Oh, they all went to
moving
they all went to
through.
YouTube.
Right, Todd. Right. Probably some of them went from YouTube to podcasting and went backwards, back
Yeah.
that way again.
Oh,
too.
okay. Can't do that.
Possible.
Although I have a couple of my favorite YouTube channels that have started podcasts. One of them finally responded
Oh,
to
awesome.
one of my comments, and they said, "Tell me more about this RSS thing." It only took me about 6 or 7 of their quote unquote episodes for them to finally see my comment and tell me more. So I did tell them more. So I think that those folks are actually going to sign up for Blueberry and have their RSS feed over on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else podcasts can be consumed. I'm like, they didn't know. They really did not know.
Interesting that they didn't know.
They didn't know. Really? We're supposed to do that? And I'm like, what do you have? Okay, can you? Here's the thing here's how I tricked them. I said, take your iPhone and look for your show in the podcast app. And they're like, we're not in there. And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah, that's the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So what happened here? Oh. So, yeah. So tell your favorite YouTube channels that they should be an Apple Podcast too. Hound them every video
because
release.
it is shocking and surprising to me that there's a lot of podcasts that don't think to be an Apple.
Well, they live feeding
in Spotify.
They live feeding the beast.
Yeah.
And they get the type of numbers over there where they're being heavily monetized. They're making big money over there. So
we have seen a little bit of fall off in Apple's delivery of podcasts, right? To some degree, you've said no, but there's plenty of other folks that have said there's been a fall off.
We'll have our numbers. Let me see if I can go over and look. Let's see here. Can I do it from here? May not be able to do it from. Oh, I gotta go to this site. Oh, I don't want to say that URL out loud.
So, Todd, after this thing that you're digging up, let's talk a little bit about what we think we should be trying to accomplish in podcasting in 2024.
All right. So why don't you go ahead and start? Let me see if I can find this.
Well, I think one of the things is that it's probably worth a revisiting of podcast metrics, and trying to figure out if, as an industry, we can come together and really come up with a standard. Because I think we're under pressure a little bit from the OP3 folks as they have come up with a standard. And I know that the IAB metrics guidelines, the key word in that name is guidelines, not standard, right?
It is a standard.
But we've always couched it, Todd,
Yeah, I
over the
know,
years
I know.
to be not a standard. So because nobody could agree, right?
Right.
So that was always the caveat, and what it was basically a way to appease all the arguments to some degree, right?
Mhm.
Around what that should look like, and also, accepting the fact that there was going to be some variability between platforms. But I'm just wondering if that is a noose around our neck
No,
that's being used against us now.
not because the OP3 folks have very few shows that are being measured on the platform. If they were,
Yeah, but that's not my point, Todd. I mean, my point is that variability between hosting platforms on the guidelines is a vulnerability.
advertisers are, it's not a vulnerability. Advertisers have spreadsheets.
Well, it's
Agencies-
a vulnerability in perception because people are thinking that the metric standards need to change.
Who
we
thinks the
look to the
metrics need
future.
to? Who thinks the metrics need to change?
Lots of people. I hear comments
Well,
around
then they
it
need
all
then
the
they
time.
then they need to speak up at the IAB meetings.
Well, that's kind of my bigger point, Todd, is that the industry needs to come together and come up with an actual standard that everybody adheres to. Not
Rob,
options for this way of doing it, options for that way of doing it. And then some people have different opt out bot lists than other people, white lists, black lists. People have different, it creates what we were trying to.
no one is ever going to agree to share all their secret formulas and how they measure.
It's not about sharing secret formulas, Todd. And I think that's where we're going sideways here is that, if we're going to have consistent metrics across the industry, and these platforms shouldn't compete based on metrics.
They're not.
That was always the goal of the IAB, was to take metrics off the table.
Yeah, I haven't heard no one complain about deltas between Blueberry and Libsyn and differences
But yet
between
they
us.
exist.
But it's
yet
very, very
they-
small, very tiny
Okay,
differences.
That's always the argument, Todd, is that, those differences are very small.
Yeah, a couple
but-
percentage points. So
but
so
by
what?
saying that, you're admitting that there is differences.
Well, that's
and-
for us. That is a sales advantage.
I understand, Todd, also that you don't want to invest in making changes or share your secrets. So
No, no
there's
way.
Kind
Not
of another aspect of
N-
this too.
not a day. No, I got millions of dollars wrapped up in my stat system. No way.
No way. What?
No way I'm sharing.
That's kind of my point. We're leaving ourselves open for criticism.
No, there's no criticism. Have not heard of a
I hear
criticism
it all the
in a-
time, Todd.
From
I mean, it's
who?
not-
from podcasters. You don't hear it from agencies. They're not
People are
complaining.
Look at what just happened with Apple.
Guess what? Great
You're
sales
saying that
advantage for
nothing-
me.
Nothing changed on your platform, but 6% changed on Libsyn's platform.
Yep. Because guess what? They're not investing.
What do you mean they're not
Investing in improving their stats platform.
How do you know that, Todd?
Well, they had a 6% difference. If they would have built into their system overqualification, okay.
Yeah, but there's no standard. So
Yeah, there
how
is a
would
standard.
Anybody know what is consistent across?
There is a standard. The problem is it's the minimum standard. It's the minimum requirement. That's what
Yeah,
people
but-
need to realize. It's the minimum.
Yeah. But yet, if you look at all of the other IAB metrics standards, not just podcasts, they are strict standards.
Well, here's the thing.
Podcast is the outlier,
And they
in
will
this.
never, ever, MRC will never, ever certify a podcast host because it comes from log data, not from client data. MRC, anything that MRC
but that's-
qualifies is all based on client data. And you're not going to get client data from Apple, from
So why did the
YouTube.
MRC come into this conversation?
MRC is what's made all the other mediums more tight.
Okay. Well, that also plays into a narrative that's not good for
Well, the
the
MRC has said for
industries-
years they're not going to do it. because
which is also a vulnerability.
No,
to
it's
the
not a
industry as
vulnerability.
well.
It's a fact. Podcasting is a different medium type.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to continue to be criticized by the ad buyers.
I have not heard an ad buyer
brands.
criticize numbers in years. Haven't heard it.
Okay, well then that means that the ad sales folks are doing that for them somehow. So how do you justify different metrics from different platforms? So let's say a show moves from platform B to platform C.
Yep.
Right. And the ad buyer knows that platform C has different numbers than platform B, or
Usually
the other platform.
usually the ad buyer has a spreadsheet.
Right. Right. So I hear people in the ad. I mean, I think if you were to talk to Brian Berletta, or you would talk to anybody on the
here's the
industry
problem.
side,
Brian
they would say that there's a problem
Well,
with the metrics.
yeah, because Brian isn't in the trenches and doesn't understand where we've been.
Mm-hmm.
And plus,
Yeah.
you're never going to get to where you want to be without client-side data. Until all
Well, that's driving the narrative of pushing towards proprietary distribution here, Todd.
well, that would be
not open.
Well, then that's, well, guess what? Then go ahead, knock yourself the hell out.
No, I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm saying talking about client-side data is talking about proprietary platforms.
That's why Spotify has an advantage.
Yeah,
because they have
can
all the
sell
client-side
actual
data.
Listener-side data, which is
how's that working out for them?
Well, it also is a point of that they can drive a wedge against how we're doing it, because
they already are
sporadic and so inconsistent.
They already are.
It's easy to criticize.
Yeah, they already are,
and pull budgets back from.
Yep, they already are.
Right.
But is that helping? Who's that helping? Not very many podcasters.
Which part? The client-side data?
The only people that are worried about download and play numbers are podcasters that are running advertising in their shows, which still remains a very small minority of podcasts. For the 95% of the other shows, they don't care.
So why wouldn't we as an industry want to have a metric standard that's across
They
the board
will never
for everyone?
agree to a tighter standard.
I'm not saying tighter.
Oh, it has to
I'm
be.
just saying,
how did I not have a big drop? Because I have a tighter standard that I run.
Well, that's a race to lower numbers, right?
Absolutely.
So is that what everybody wants, is a spiral race to the lowest number?
Do you think? Okay. So let's just take one variable in the IEB spec, just one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is something OP3 can't get because they don't have the log data. Let's say that I say to qualify something as a player listen that you have to have 20% of that media file delivered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think that's going to do to people's revenue? Instead of 1 minute.
It's right. It's going to cause it to drop.
Exactly.
So if one platform does that, but another platform makes it, a smaller number, then there's a discrepancy between those two platforms that then puts us right back into where we were before we ever had the
means
IEP.
My podcasters perform better.
Well, that could be the case. Yeah, I agree with you on that. But that's not the metric that things are oftentimes looked at on the advertising side.
The advertisers are always
not at the beginning of
the advertisers are always going to back it out and see what their CPA was if they're on a DR.
Right. No, I agree. After the campaign is done,
Yeah.
I'm talking about on the buy side, on the buy end. How are they going to evaluate?
We've been running
at
for
the beginning?
we've been running for 18 years.
I know you have.
19 years almost now without client-side data. And it is what
and we're still seeing platforms take big haircuts after all these years. Look at what happened to Lipson. Look what happened to other platforms that got caught in this iOS 17. Right? They got exposed. Right?
Sure.
As having weak metrics.
Not having weak metrics.
Granted, if you
not
you
having,
made it through there unscathed,
that's
kudos to you.
Not having weak metrics, having not analyzed deep enough.
Okay, fair enough.
So
we want to keep it as a competitive tool.
For me, it's a competitive tool.
Right.
I always tell podcasters moving to us, prepare for your numbers to go down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a frustrating thing for a podcaster. I mean,
sure,
we've seen this a lot, Todd. We've seen platforms take haircuts repeatedly over the years.
Yep.
And some put it off, and then years later they got hit.
Yep.
With a big one, and they lost a lot of their podcasters because of it. So it's a gamble, the industry not having a strict standard across the industry. It's
so because OP3 uses redirects, their numbers, just like our redirect, is always going to be lower than the hosted data.
They're doing it the only way they can do it.
Right. Until they start processing raw log data from podcasters.
Or if whatever that methodology that they have gets turned into a standard that's implemented on other platforms.
Yeah, but the problem
that would be the only other way of doing it.
It's not going to be, because no one's going to buy into that. People are already too heavily invested in the IEB, for better or for worse.
Well, yeah, and I think that the worst part is how expensive it is.
Its prices come down considerably. It's not like what it was.
Okay.
I think the renewal this year is going to be around, I don't know, 7,000 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
A renewal for a member.
Just a renewal, but you still have to pay the IEB fees.
Right. And, so it's still in the end a big check to write. At what point does that become less valuable? I don't know. There's a new guideline that is being drafted right now. So,
okay. Is there a timeline when that may be out?
I think they're probably come the new year. At some point, I can't go into the latest meeting, but at some point it'll be made for public review.
And will that be a significant change? Will it bring us closer to more of a uniform kind of
minimum? The minimum download's still a minute, so.
Oh, it is okay.
I can't go into any more details than that, Rob.
It's that 2 hour versus 24 hours what creates all the variability. Well, I mean, a chunk of it might be the right way of saying
the 24-hour stuff is fair. Just based on pure statistics, in that, again, the number of times you see the same IP with the same user agent twice is very, very low.
2 hours, you're going to see that IP more frequently.
Yeah, but 24 hours, I think the 24 hours number is safe. That's a good minimum.
But if you want to have higher numbers, then you opt in for the 2 hour.
Well, you can't be certified if you're doing 2 hours.
I thought that was the optional range.
No, there's no optional range. It's 24 hours. There's no optional range.
Okay.
24 hours is the number. Some people might be doing 2 hours, but that's not an IEB certified number.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because I always heard that was those were the two options.
No, it's 24 hours.
Had to choose one or the other.
Yeah, 24 hours. Matter of fact, that was quite in the early days of the discussions on. That was quite the. If you think about it, you have to get.
That's a big difference in.
You get 30 plus companies in the same room to agree on a document is very, very difficult. The politics behind getting 30 companies to say yes, we'll put our name on this is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So it could be tighter, but again, if it's tighter, then what do? Start taking money out of people's pocket because the numbers are lower.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of a self-destructive process too, because then it drives people to not want to support the standard either.
So the iOS 17 was definitely an anomaly, but it was based upon back catalog. Now there's some other stuff that's happened with iOS 17 that have affected the numbers a little bit too. So the change has been good in that regard.
Right.
But every app has different rules on how many episodes it downloads and how far back in the catalog. So every app has if there was just one app, but there's not. That's where Spotify has the advantage. They have one app. There's not variability between any of their stuff. They know exactly what they've got. We've got 100 apps. And there's variability on how those apps work, how they download the data when if there's follow or subscribed, preload or whatever they do. There's 100 different variabilities that no other industry has to put up with. YouTube doesn't do that. YouTube's got one number because everyone's on the same system. Podcasting's unique because we're distributed, because it's open. It's, every Dick, Tom, and Harry has built a podcast app. So the numbers will never be completely perfect unless there's just one company that ends up selling all advertising to podcast. And then they'll rig the numbers however way they want.
Right. Yeah.
But
yeah, it's interesting.
But, this is not the first time there's been a haircut that's been taken by platforms. I can't remember the last one. Last one was when we actually implemented the standard. That's when the big haircuts were taken, because we got it tighter because there was haircuts all over the place.
Well, it was the haircuts that came about through the shift in support for the IAB metric standard.
Right. So it made a big adjustment.
Really brought the haircuts.
It made a big adjustment then.
Some of the platforms took incremental steps in that path.
That's right.
Because they didn't want to have it all of a sudden done at one time.
So it stepped down over 6 months.
Right. But that just extended the pain over a year versus getting it done.
And here's the funny part. We went first.
I know you did. Yeah.
We went first along with NPR. So, and I think we took a little haircut in that first round in implementing the specs. We learned from some of that too. And that's when I said, okay, let's go deeper. Let's overqualify this stuff. Let's make sure and I don't want to do this again.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe I've missed something. And maybe at some point we'll find something that we missed. And you never know.
Yeah.
But we had the advantage of the early days where everyone was trying to do fraud. So, we had fraud prevention built in before we had actual good measurement stuff. We put more investment into fraud than we did on.
Was it more kind of bots?
Yeah,
bots and
fraudulent
clicks.
Yeah,
right.
People running the click farms. So that was we put a lot of investment in that before we even really looked at some of the other stuff. Because the fraud was 50%.
Yeah, I'm not seeing as many people pitching buying downloads anymore. So I don't know about you.
It's plays. They've all switched to the word play, but it's still a download.
Okay, so they are still selling plays, is what you're saying?
Yeah, plays is that's how people are.
Because I haven't seen it in my inbox of people pitching that.
Yeah, everyone. They just changed the word. Download and play are the same word. It's just they just changed the word.
Or it's impression.
No, it's not. That's one person that's going to be severely impacted by doing that.
You think so?
I think so. I think that's very, 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 very bad idea.
But that's what the advertisers want, Todd. That's what the brands want.
No, they don't.
They want to buy.
The smart. They don't. They know they're still getting Okay, an impression is a play and a play is a download. Same word, same meaning. You get
very different
connotation, but it's a
connotation.
But guess what? Impressions. That's the last thing I want to say. My website had 22,000 impressions today. Okay, great. We'll give you $1.75.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you could ever call. I don't have to worry about it. I'm not involved in that stupidity.
Right.
And I think it's a very bad idea. I think people that decide to go that, they're not following the standard.
Yeah, because the standard doesn't refer to impressions.
No.
Right.
But
yeah, I think it's easier to sell inventory if you tell an advertiser that they're getting an ad impression.
Well,
right? Because that's what a lot of these brands have been sold on the player platforms.
Okay, guess what? That'll be a faster race to the bottom because oh my God. Yeah, wait till the CPMs drop like a rock.
Well, that's what Norm at Podcast One wanted to do many, many years ago, right?
Well, he was counting by sixes anyway, so that's how he made up
more money in his pocket.
That's how he made up. No, that's how. But at the same time, I was going into media buyers, and they were showing me a spreadsheet, and they were discounting
that's true.
his inventory.
Yeah,
so they were saying, so they're like, okay, they're giving me 28, and they're giving him 11, or 10, or 9, or 7 because they know he's overcounting.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing now. I can't speak to what they do today.
I don't.
This is a long time ago.
This is Podcast One. This is who we're talking about. Yeah.
So
I don't know if I don't think they're IAB.
No, they're not. They remain not.
Right. But they were on all those calls.
Oh, and I can't go into those calls would make a great podcast.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm bound. I can't. We just all know it was lively.
Well, and I think if in the context of what we just talked about was that if you take the context of all those phone calls, all those group calls that were had, to really think that we can come up with an agreed to across the industry metric standard is probably
It was a series of compromises.
Right. And that's probably putting it kindly, compared to really what it was. Right. So it was more like, this is the way it's going to be. And
no, I'll go back and I'll just say it. Angelo Mandato.
A group of people there had to come together to make that happen because, right.
Angelo Mandato at NAB talked about this years before. He came armed with spreadsheets and printouts
to Podcast Movement and presented.
It was at NAB, and they all got in a room together. It was about 100 degrees, and battled it out. And he beat them. In other words, they could no longer.
Not physically, but
they could no longer
beat them with data.
Beat them with data. They could no longer push the agenda that was being pushed. The reason that Blueberry, Libsyn, and Podtrac joined the IAB is because other people were trying to ramrod something through that
wasn't derived from the data.
Was not derived from data. So Rob Freeland, Mark McCurry, Angelo, and basically became the thorn and a whole bunch of companies' sides to squeeze the thresholds to get to a compromise point that they are today.
Yeah.
The original spec Angela deserved a damn medal with going in there. And and maybe, I don't know if Rob Freeland would agree, but that's where it changed. After that meeting, things changed and we made progress.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
It was it 2015, 2016?
Somewhere around there.
2016, yeah.
Was it perfect? No. Was it a minimum?
Kind of.
Mm-hmm. Kind of. So when people were looking at a 2-hour window and had to switch to a 24-hour window, they took one heck of a haircut. Major haircut.
There were probably some lawsuits flying around back then because of it too.
No.
If I recall.
No.
Well, you were brought in to do some audits. Right?
Yes.
And those came out of inflated numbers.
There wasn't lawsuits, but there was voluntary. How should we say it?
Make goods.
Voluntary check writing.
Right, voluntary check writing. Trying to avoid lawsuits. Right. Yes.
That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And was put in the middle of some very uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
Media buyers, let's just put it this way. Advertisers have known since the beginning of time that things adjust over time. It's happened in display. It's happened everywhere. There's been adjustments. It's a wild, wild west. Things get tightened up. Things get tightened up. There's adjustments. It's just part of doing business in the advertising space because this stuff happens. So advertisers are kind of used to it. In the end, if the advertiser, here's the ultimate. If the advertiser was happy with the results, if they feel they got their money's worth, there's no issue.
Right.
So let's say we've just now taken this new haircut. They should be more happy now with performance.
Right.
So there'll be a new performance level. And in return, actually, if it all comes out in the wash correctly, CPM should nudge up. If they don't, then the advertisers win because they're getting more for their money that they're spending. If CPMs don't edge up, if you think about it, in the early days, CPMs were 20, 22, 23, 25. That was pretty normal. They haven't changed, and we've taken all these haircuts, all number of haircuts over the years. Guess what? The advertisers have won because they're getting more value for the same amount of money now, and they're not upping their budgets.
Right.
So it comes out in the wash, and they don't ever give it back. They don't ever. You would think CPMs would have rose, but they've never rose. Yet some shows demand a premium. Some shows get way beyond 25. Some shows get under 25.
Yeah. It depends on the show.
Depends on the show.
And the genre, too.
And where it's hosted. And, So I don't have to fight with the media buyers anymore. I don't do that. I don't have to do it. So I think.
Yeah, so Todd. Go ahead. Go ahead and finish your thought.
The new guidelines are going to come out. We're all going to go through another round of certification. All our systems are going to be checked and run through the ringer. If we've missed something, the auditors are going to find it. And then it's up to the IAB to explain or to say, hey, we've got everyone aligned. And then in the end, when I'm sitting in front of a media buyer, I can say, my stats are a little bit better because. And in that regard, then my performance should be just a little bit better. And if it is, then we'll go down in their spreadsheet and there'll be a certain formula put against my inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Because they all do it. They have their spreadsheets, every vendor that they run against, every host, they all have their adjustment. Because when the media buyers aren't stupid, when they're running on 100 shows on Blueberry, 100 shows on Libsyn, 100 shows on PodTrack, and they perform differently. Why do they perform differently? Well, because maybe the numbers are just a little bit different. So they adjust, they come back and say, okay, here's your contract, here's your CPM, and they average it out in the end.
Yeah, Todd, a lot of my comments on this topic about the metrics and things like that somewhat came from an article that was posted by Oxford Road, the big ad buying agencies.
Yep.
And they ran down the situation with the IAB download, right? And the title of the article was "The Lowdown on the Download," and they basically just ran through this, the topic that we just kind of covered to some degree was that downloads are not impressions. They totally agree with that, and that just because something was downloaded completely doesn't mean that it was ever heard.
That's right.
Right. So I think we all agree on that. But their bottom line to this was that this lack of standardization leaves the industry susceptible to fraud and manipulation of the numbers, creating a misleading impression that advertisers are receiving more than what they actually got delivered.
Well, that's
directly from their article.
And when that happened last time, guess who was being called?
You.
Best thing for Oxford Road to do is to hire a Blueberry or hire PodTrack or whoever you trust the most and say, I need a commercial account. Run your own prefixes. Give them to across all the shows.
Yeah, but that doesn't solve the core issue that they have.
It gives them a number to work from.
Just gives them a different number, but it's based on the same methodology.
But it's based upon they get the same number for all the shows running all their ad deals. So they, as a company, can work off one standard and not have to work off 6 different reports they get from 6 different providers. They get their own report.
Yeah, I think where the variability comes into play here is that just because a media file or an ad was delivered doesn't mean it was heard. And one of the variables that they don't know is what's the audience engagement of episode completion, right? Of listening.
Right.
And there's no way for anybody to know except for a player platform to know that currently.
No,
right?
we know of a sample.
It's an estimate.
It's a sample of each show. We can say that 8% or 9% of this show's audience got to 78% mark
of download. That's all you can see.
Of
you
active
can't see
play.
plays.
Yeah, we can see plays. Again, it's a small sample. That's what we have retention data for. This is something no one else has. It's something that we built. And again, it's a small sample. 7 or 8
based on so where are you pulling that data from?
Log data.
No, but where was the consumption experience for the listener?
On a variety of different apps when they click play, not when they hit follow.
So how can you definitively tell between the process of a download versus a process of a play?
Depends. And that's when the part of the secret formula that we've run for a number of years to get that data. And again, every application does a little different behavior.
So wouldn't we want to have that for the whole industry?
Great. Todd? Pay me for it. Give me 10 million. I'll give you the formula.
Okay. So if that's true, Todd, then there is a pathway forward for the industry to address this concern.
But it's a sample. Right? It's a sample of the data. It's not for 90%. It's downloaded within seconds.
Right.
It's
really what you're counting is playback that happens on slow connections.
Well, we're also not all that. Again, every app is different in how it consumes data when it's actively hit play. Every app has a different.
Every app is different, Todd?
Some of them are both together and do things kind of similarly, but I'll just leave it at that. Someone else go do the research. But you can see a certain segment of content that is chunked out. And it's not completely accurate. So if someone is actively listening to a show,
Right.
and
so how do we solve this problem, Todd?
we don't
Not
until
from
we
a
get
competitive
okay. So how do we?
standpoint,
So you have to have client side data. You have to. So example, let's say.
but you just told me that there is a pathway.
Well,
that
there
you don't have
is.
to.
There is for a segment of data. But let's say someone has listened to 30 minutes of a show.
Mhm.
It's already chunked ahead a little bit.
Mhm.
So even there's some wiggle room. They hit stop.
Mhm.
We've already delivered maybe, let's say, of an hour program, and they're at 35 minutes. Maybe they've already chunked up to 42 minutes. So even
Right.
within that data, there is some variability.
Well, because Todd, by not deploying this industry wide, what we're doing is we're handing the keys over to the proprietary platforms to come in and say, you guys weren't able to do this. We're going to have to do it, and we're going to get all the advertising.
Okay, so let's go back then to talk about what failed. RAD failed. This was an attempt by NPR to get this data, and
agreed.
And it failed.
This is a way around having to do RAD.
But you will never. It's already been attempted. You'll never get the top 10 podcast apps to provide client-side data. You'll never get
but on a proprietary ecosystem, you don't have to, Todd.
I know that.
But Apple has their data.
Sure.
Spotify has their data. Sirius has their data. And those folks are the only people that can sell advertising because the advertisers are looking for play data.
And you have to go to every other non-big player like that and say, give us client-side data. And then you're going to get 10% picture, just like we've got a 10% picture in retention data.
Well, I can tell you Spotify has complete picture.
Of course.
Stuff.
So does Apple.
Right.
They've all got that information.
So it's not a sample. It's
No.
the complete,
of course,
complete view.
Of course.
Which is a competitive advantage for those platforms around.
It's not a competitive advantage because 95% of podcasters on Spotify are not getting a dime.
No. Yeah, I'm not talking about.
So
revenue.
as soon as podcasters learn that Spotify's never going to pay them, then
I'm talking about data, Todd. I'm not talking about revenue.
I know, but it ultimately leads to revenue.
Or lack of, like you just made the point.
To a lack of.
So that's even more of a reason to do this from an industry perspective.
But you're not going to be able to do it from industry standard. Rob, you go ahead and spearhead.
Okay, but you just told me that it was possible to do that.
Okay, but again,
right.
They're still not going to be satisfied. So go to Marco and say, Marco, we want you to tell us when a podcast listener hit stop. You know what he's going to tell you? Kiss my ass. He probably won't say that. He just won't respond. He'll say no. He doesn't like advertising to begin with. Go to Pocket Cast and say, we want...
That's a different argument.
We want client-side data. No, they're not going to give it to you. If they were smart, they would sell it.
Right. That was my next comment.
They would sell it back.
What's the pathway?
Yeah, they would sell it back to those companies that need that data.
Right.
And then you'd have to have the listeners opt in to have that data shared.
So I guess the bigger question is this situation going to persist for the next 20 years?
Yep.
We're never going to do anything about it.
Not going to get fixed.
Why?
It won't. It's just the nature of being open, and it's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Okay, but there's a likelihood that because we didn't evolve this, that it will get
it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt.
Closed.
Well, then it's going to hurt those that are revenue dependent upon advertising. All the more reason for people not to be so beholden to advertising.
I just think it's bad overall it's bad for the
We've had
radar
we've had the
industry.
same conversation every year, Rob. This is the same.
I know we have, but now it's coming up again, and we're in a new environment now, and advertisers, I think, are becoming much more
Well, they've already been educated.
demanding
they can demand all they
the
want.
industry to compete.
Well,
with,
they've already
other media
they've-
that's giving them.
They've
that.
already demanded to give attribution. They've already got that. They're not going to get it. They can wish all they want. Okay, wish in one hand, advertiser, and poop in the other. And guess what? You're not going to get it. If you want it, go to YouTube, go to Spotify, spend all your money there.
Okay.
That's the answer.
Okay. I
That's
don't
the
think
answer.
there's going to be a lot of people in the industry that'll agree with you on that.
Oh, I'm sure they won't. But guess what? There's no other way. Someone tell me how to get there. There isn't a way to get there.
Well, one way is to do like you just said that you're doing.
Then spend the money and build the system to do it.
Okay.
I'm not giving it away.
All right.
And again,
Yep.
it's a sample. It's a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a wedge of uncertainty. How much further they hit stop at 30 minutes and maybe they've already chunked to 42 minutes.
Right.
So it's, on a 60-minute program, my folks got to 45 minutes. Well, maybe they didn't. Maybe they got to 30. We don't know.
Yeah.
We can't answer that. We know
Right.
they're kind of close. So even the retention data has a margin of error.
Right.
Put your advertising in early.
I just think as an industry, we're playing with our future.
Well, until someone comes out with an app that claims 97% of the listening audience, you're never going to get this data.
Okay.
Unless the industry is willing to write a check
To who?
to app developers. Say, give us this data. Put in this system where your listeners come in. So imagine, here's the experience on, let's say they give Marco a big fat check. Something he can't walk away from. Seals his
Okay.
future. Let's say it's $10 million a year. Marco's going to put in a system when people log into the app for the first time. Do you want your play data reported back to the podcaster that's running advertising their show? Do you want them to know that you heard the ad and know your play habits? Yes or no? And about
Yeah.
and a percentage.
Isn't the other like on like the music platforms, and aren't they doing?
Yeah,
things like that?
because they have it in the terms of service. Read through page
Right.
82. It's already in there. You're
Right.
already giving it up.
Right.
So there's this trade-off. This is the
There is
thing
a trade-off.
This is the thing
Right.
we've been dealing with since 2005.
That's right, and it never gets any better. That's the problem.
It doesn't. So
And every year we keep having this same argument.
And
with
the
no
reason,
pathway forward.
and here's another thing is crazy about the retention data. Depends
Mm-hmm.
on your audience makeup and where they're listening. Because if they have their audience on a certain app, the retention data that I have might be 1 or 2%. Because guess what? As soon as they hit play,
Right.
it just downloads it immediately. And
Yeah.
it depends on the app. Hit play. Oh, I can get this chunk data. A series of apps to give me this information. This is not rocket science.
Yeah.
In some apps, again, you hit play and it looks like a download.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But you can't get that without log data. You can't get. You have to have raw log data to get this minimal amount of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how. Yeah.
And sometimes the apps change. New version comes out, and all of a sudden, guess what? I'm not getting anymore.
Yeah.
Retention data or app changes. Oh, they did something. Become more efficient with bandwidth. Apps that are efficient with consumers' bandwidth are the ones we get retention data from. So I encourage you, if you're an app developer, we love it when you're really considerate of active plays of only taking the amount of data that you need to give them the audio that they are listening to. Hint, hint, hint.
Yeah.
So
Just, I think we're going to continue hearing this chime of change.
well, they're making billions of dollars, so these companies can afford to write some checks to these app developers to get this client-side data.
Yeah. Well,
you're
that
not
would be one answer. I agree with you.
You're not going to pay it to Apple. You're not going to do it for Spotify. You're not going to get it from iHeart because they're all got their own internal data. You're not going to get it from Amazon and the subset of apps. So you're going to get maybe 10, 15%. That'll be your sample. And then you got to ask all the apps that make up that 10 or 15%, got to write them a check so that they provide client data in a specification that is similar to RAD. And every company's going to have to write their own check because they're going to have to write protocols to send Blueberry data. They're going to have to send Libsyn data. They're going to have to send Podbean data, have to send PodTrack data without intermixing the streams. So that becomes very complicated.
Yeah, I think at one point, we all talked about having like an entity that sits in the middle of the industry.
That entity will have to be paid for.
Right.
So you want RAD, Rob, is what you want.
Well, RAD was more of a player.
But RAD was a
kind of a player that reported back to the hosting platform.
Blueberry's player reports back to us.
That's not what we're talking about.
I know,
here.
but the player had to be implemented by developers in order to do this.
Right. They actually had to replace their existing players that they had right now. And so what you're talking about here is actually taking the data from their existing players.
Absolutely.
Not replacing it with the RAD. And I think where we went sideways on the RAD stuff was that this new player had vulnerabilities in it.
And here's another thing that you're up against. Most apps have no server infrastructure. It's on the phone. You subscribe to a podcast, they go out to Apple Podcasts, they don't have a server.
You mean the apps don't have a supporting server?
Nope.
For
A lot of apps
infrastructure?
Nope. A lot of apps run standalone. They make a call out to Apple Podcasts. They don't have infrastructure. Marco does.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to say. I think any kind of modern platform that has any kind of infrastructure has a database that drives the
database comes from Apple.
No, that's just a access to the data.
That's right, but they don't have the core. Most of these apps do not have their own. Why run it when you can just do the API call back to Apple?
I mean, I've talked to a lot of these developers too, and they have their own SQL database. And what they do is they do a query against the Apple APIs, pull the data in, and then parse it out.
I think very few do that. We'll have to ask the app developers how many do. I think a lot of them run standalone.
I mean, it's so easy now to get a SQL database.
But again, I think
the
cost them money. And when they're not making any money on their apps, it's an overhead cost to run that server.
I just don't think that the Apple APIs would actually support that.
Well, I think it does. Again, I'm not
like
a
real-time call against their whole catalog.
Absolutely. They're not making a call on a whole catalog.
Well, that's what you would want. If
I don't know what. Again, I'm sure most of those apps have a base catalog already in their system.
Right. So they had to populate it through pulling the APIs over time.
Again,
that data has to go somewhere. I mean, I guess it could go directly to the app.
Well, you have to talk to an app developer. I'm not, but my understanding is most apps don't have a lot of. Well, if they do, it's minimal.
Right. No, I'm not saying it's extensive database. It's just kind of like a basic SQL that has maybe half dozen.
To get what you want, you have to have a whole new set of logging and parsing, and that's a heavy lift.
All you're doing is capturing what is in the item lists of the of the RSS feeds, and you're pulling that data, and you're probably not even pulling the image. You're actually probably pulling a link to the image.
Yeah, potentially. All right. Hey, Rob, we're
long. Okay.
And,
all right. Well, I thought it was a good show. I think we talked about a lot of important topics going forward into the new year, and there's certainly a million more to talk about, but that's for more episodes, right?
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. No show next. Well, Rob will be on his own next week.
Yeah. I'll try and do an episode about the Hall of Fame next week. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'm Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News on X, at Geek News, at geeknews.chat on Mastodon.
Yeah. And I have my own website at Rob Greenlee, or not at, but robgreenlee.com. And then I'm on Twitter at Rob Greenlee. And you can send me an email if you want, robgreenlee@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. And I'm sure Todd would love to hear from you too. Share any tips or anything that you see going on. And it's always good to hear from you.
And at the same time, I'm doing my tech show a day early because I'm about to embark on travel. So about an hour from now, Geek News Central will be live for those of you that are here. So hang out, and we'll be back on the air in about an hour with that show. So
you will. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So prep starts immediately, and then I'm post-processing 2 shows at the end of this show. So I'm going to be here until late. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Love to hear your commentary.
Yeah.
Send us some boost on the show today. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks.